Hey, welcome to another episode of the DTC Insider podcast. I'm Brian Rosenthal, your host, and today I'm going to interview Olaf Kreisig. He's a co-founder of BOAS, the vintage platform that saves jeans and lives, as 90% of profit is donated to life-saving initiatives. Hey, Olaf, thanks for being on the show.
Hey Brian, thanks for having me. Love to be here.
Yeah, my pleasure. So I could dare to say that most founders measure success by the revenue they generate. That seems to be different for you, isn't it?
It definitely is different for us. And it really comes down, like obviously revenues for us is also important because if we don't have revenue, we can't have profits and we can't save genes and then save lives. But just trying to like look at maximizing our revenue is not something that we're necessarily striving towards. For us, it's more about being able to generate enough revenue to cover our costs and then scale towards making those profits happen. And once those profits are there, we can then repurpose those to save lives. That's pretty much what we focus on right
Okay. And why, if we might know, of course, why or how did you come up with that company vision and why did you decide to go that route?
now. Oh, absolutely. So our CEO, Vincent, he's worked for all kinds of corporations, especially like had experience with like Adidas and Samsung. And then he also worked for a lot of NGOs. And it was his vision that NGOs tend to struggle with financing. They have to like do all these kind of like initiatives to try and raise capital. But on the other side of the spectrum, you have a lot of like giant for-profit corporations that, like even if you look at the news now, you'll hear things like, record high profits. Look at the tech industry right now, mass layoffs, but record high profits. Um, and he thought to himself, like, maybe there's a way that we can, bridge this gap. And that's essentially where BOAS comes from. And for myself, as I bought into this vision, it also comes down to essentially one part of how I was raised. The other part is the fact is that I'm pretty neurodivergent. And because of that, I have a lot of empathy inside of me. Um, and I also just really think that, if you look at like people's individual utility curves, at some point you reach that maximum level. And a couple of years ago, right around 2020, 2021, our industry, online, e-commerce, everything was peaking. The pandemic, everybody needed to be online. There was work everywhere, people were throwing money at everything. Um, and that's also when I had this like epiphany, actually, when I was traveling through Colombia for the first time and I came back from the Colombian jungle. I realized like, is this really what I want to be doing? Like, do I really want to be dedicating, all this time, energy, and passion and drive that I have for like smaller select few companies where I don't necessarily buy into the vision? And the answer was no. And after that, I started looking around like, hey, what are the opportunities out there? What do I believe in? Where can I put, my own personal ethos and combine it with like a business one? And this just seemed like a venture that I could, one, support, that I could believe in, and where I felt comfortable. Right?
Awesome. So you saved the first life last year.
We did. Yes,
Congrats.
we
First
did.
and
Thanks.
foremost, congrats. How did that make you feel? Because one thing is to say we are here to save genes and to save lives, and another is to say, hey, we saved this kid's life. What was it like?
Honestly, it was shocking because of the fact that you realize how little you actually need to do to be able to save a life, right? You might think to yourself, what do you mean so little? It's like it comes down at the end of the day to like a mathematical equation almost, right? Saving a person's life can relate to a lot of things. In this case, we were just donating most of our profits to the Malaria Foundation, right? And they were able to provide treatment to somebody who was undergoing, who had to go undergo malaria treatment. And if without that treatment, that person just, or that child would not be alive to this day anymore. Right. So it comes down to like a pretty simple thing. It's also why we chose that kind of a charity to support, or that kind of initiative to support, because we knew it would be like the most impactful. Um, and how it made us feel good, nice, but I feel like there's so much more work to be done. I'm not a person, growth mindset, growth background. I'm not a person who like once you reach a certain milestone that I feel like, yay, we've done it. No, we're done. Let's not do anything else anymore. If anything, I feel like it lights a fire in you and you just feel like you want to do more and you want to strive for more. So just the fact that we made it happen in a single year, for us, it just means like, okay, does that mean where's the bar, right? Can we go to 15 this year? Is it going to be 30? What's it going to depend on? And where's the limit, right? Where can we take this?
Funny because you said you were thinking about goals of how many lives you were going to save this year. Is it 15? Is it 30? And that's probably the conversation I have with my clients, but around the revenue, not.
Yeah, exactly.
And so, how do you balance both worlds? I mean, in a context in which we recently discussed with Neil Goyal at Tapcart and with some other founders too, that the main struggle, I would say the number one struggle for most DTC brands, for many businesses, but in this case for DTC brands, across the board for small brands and big brands is profitability. In this
Right.
case, you donate 90% of it. So how do you balance that to be able to grow? And how can you afford to be different while they are struggling even to be profitable?
That's an excellent question. And, we're not 100% never struggling, right? But to us, it comes down to a few simple things. And when you look at it, our business model is pretty unique. First of all, we sell vintage jeans, right? And our cost of goods, right, to get them to purchase them, is quite low, which means the margins when it comes to like potential profit per item, is not like crazy high, but it's high enough to like warrant a lot of things, right? Um, so that's the first thing that you have to consider. What else plays a role into it is that we try to look at it from a business perspective first, like how do we cover our costs? How do we cover our daily expenses? And then how do we drive the revenue without necessarily increasing those expenses? So we've done a bit of advertising, we've done a bit of media buying, that's also a bit of my background. And we just very quickly realized that's not like where we're going to be driving our growth from. And also because of our unique business model and the way that the company is structured, we're not out there trying to raise a lot of funds from like investors, which means we have less capital available. So we also have less capital to invest immediately back into the business. But what that does do is it creates like what I would like to call sustainable growth, where we're not under enormous pressure to hit certain revenue targets or profit targets within an X amount of time, because otherwise things are just going to go really badly. But instead, we're trying to optimize our cash flow to make sure that we have enough to buy our inventory, to make sure that we have customers coming in, that we can pay people, and we can mostly cover our expenses. And once we've reached that and we have like that break even, we have some profits, we can then redistribute it, right? A big part of it though is that most of us, we don't really right now take a salary. So from the founding team, most of us don't really get paid a normal what you would call C-level salary, which is totally fine. It's also an arrangement that we made, and it's like an agreement that all of us have reached, where we said like, like for now we're not going to be taking home salaries unless we reach that stage. And the only reason that we can do that is because most of us, right, have before this worked for companies that have paid us very well. So we've been able to save up money. So we're in this like very luxurious, kind of like privileged position even, that we can do this for a while. Of course, it's not going to be super sustainable long term. And at some point, we have to start paying ourselves a living wage as well. But by instituting things like maximum salary caps, like we have already decided that our maximum salary go to home salary is going to be 120,000 euros, or sorry, dollars per year. So we have that cap. So we're trying to continuously limit where our spending goes, and focus on what really drives the cash, and not trying to instantly reach that super high scalable level that a lot of companies are trying to do. And of course, by not investing a lot in things like media buying, we have just a very strong organic presence. And frankly, also that's the reason that we decided to open a physical store. But I think that's probably going to come up next. So
Yeah, no, please tell me more about it. I know that you recently opened a physical store. Again, congrats. It was
thanks.
In January, right?
Yeah. Yes.
And why did you decide to do that? I mean, to do that, because one thing is to be sustainable as a company with an online store with less expenses and overhead. But why did you decide to go the extra mile and open that store?
Honestly, because of the customers and the customer journey. Whenever you're I mean, I don't know if you've ever gone on Vinted and tried to find yourself a pair of vintage jeans, but you're gonna run into a very quick problem, which is what's my size? What kind of jeans do I like? And what quality are they? If you go on Reddit and you go to the vintage Levi's subreddit and things like that, you'll see that there's a lot of people who will give you advice. But at the end of the day, buying jeans, especially like vintage jeans, is really, really hard. So for us, it became very quickly quite apparent that for us to lower the threshold for people to make that purchase, we have to make it as easy as possible for our customers to find the right pair of jeans. Now, we used to do that by adding things like size guides and measurement things, and even showing like how to measure it properly at home, and having a very flexible return policy. If you buy something and it doesn't fit, please send it back to us. We'll send you a replacement pair. And naturally, also our team internally, any jeans that come in, we measure them, remeasure them, make sure that they're clean. We wash them. There's an entire quality assessment process in it. But the physical store helps people not just touch the product, but it helps them try it on, right? Additionally, if you either check it whenever it's either myself, Vincent, or Balash, who's our COO, if we're in the store, we can probably tell you within the span of like 2 minutes by just looking at you roughly what type of size jeans you're going to need and from which brand you can buy them, right? So if you're looking for a Levi's, a lot of people, of course, they come in, they look for a Levi's 501, but they don't know that a Levi's 505, for instance, would also suit them, right? But now that we have that experience and we have that knowledge, we can provide it. That is not an experience that we can replicate online, at least not yet, right? I think I would love to be able to replicate it online. It's just not possible. But we do see that people who come in to the physical store and they make a purchase offline, that they then realize, hey, they feel more comfortable about their sizing. They know who we are. They trust us now, and they feel comfortable knowing that they can order it, they can get it, and it will likely fit them better because they've bought it before, right? So that was really just honestly a really clever strategic decision. And also, we ran a small trial just after Black Friday. Once we realized there was an opening, we found a really nice spot in Amsterdam in the city center. And for a pop up, we opened there up for like 4 days. And during one of those days, we sold 60 pairs of jeans like offline. Can you imagine like how much that actually is? If I tell a customer about this like online, or if I think even about e-commerce brands I've worked with, and I tell them like, we sold 60 products in a single day. I mean, people are going to go crazy for that, because think about how much work you need to put in online to drive that kind of customer acquisition, right? How much costs are going to be involved. And here it was basically walk in. Of course, we did some marketing, we promoted it on some apps, we hosted an event and things like that. And of course, people started talking about it. But it's a physical place. People walk past it, they see jeans, and they're like, oh yeah, everybody needs jeans, right? So they walk in, and after that, the whole sales process becomes a lot smoother. I mean, if you go buy a car, you probably want to talk to the person selling you the car, and that personal experience is not something that you can easily replicate online, right? But this is a tangent I can go on for a very long time. So
No, it's okay.
yeah,
I
feel free to
mean,
ask me your questions.
I think that it's that nowadays I was talking with somebody the other day, and we both agreed on the fact that today we need to diversify the channels, the acquisition and retention channels, because many people likes doing things one way and some other people the other way. My wife looks for things instead of Google, she uses Instagram for finding new stuff. I use Google. Some other people use marketplaces, I don't know, Amazon. So different people, different habits. Many people like buying offline. Many people don't have any problem buying online. So I think that of course, there always will be some overlap, but I think that having both channels, it's healthy for the brand because one, not everyone is close to the store, not everyone is willing to go to the store, and many people like buying online. And if you make it easy for them, I met a brand the other day, a SaaS company actually. It was, I don't remember the name, but they made it easier for brands and users to try products on before buying, like trying before
Yeah.
you buy. So that probably reduces the risk because this is about reducing the risk for the customers to dare to buy online, right?
Yeah, of course.
And yeah. but I think that both approaches are great. We were discussing that not with online with offline stores, but with apps. With Tapcart, many brands have their app, and for many brands, including some of our clients, I don't know, one third or half of their purchases happen on the app. Is there any overlap? Of course, there will be some overlap. Is that cannibalization or something like that? No. And yes, at the same time, it's like, that's okay. We need to offer people more options. Some people will say, oh, now you have an app. I prefer to buy there than on the website. And some people will say, oh, you have an app. So what? I prefer to buy on the website. And that's awesome. That's great. So I think
Exactly.
the
Yeah,
more, the
absolutely.
merrier. And that's a great initiative you guys did. So I'm looking forward to learning over time how it goes. Now I wanted to ask you something you just said as well. You said that you come from different backgrounds, and that's why you can support or have the luxury, as you defined it,
Yeah.
to be in this position and to do good for somebody else, and that's awesome. So, I correct me if I'm wrong, but you in your previous roles, you were a growth hacker. Is that correct, or you were in that space? Is that
Well,
correct?
mostly no, it is absolutely correct. Although, like nowadays, you can't really we don't really use the word hacker anymore, right? Because of the
Exactly.
negative
Yeah.
implication. So everybody calls themselves growth marketers nowadays, or growth
Yes.
strategists, or growth consultants, whatever new lingo comes out, right? But yeah, definitely. I have been, I still am fundamentally. I still consider myself a growth marketer. Um, and I don't think that's ever going to change. Uh, and the reason I say that is because, quite simply, I try to always look at the whole business picture, right? And not just at a very specific thing, right? You have very talented people that I know. You just talked about omni-channel, selling on, covering Instagram, selling on like Amazon, selling on different platforms. You have experts for those things, right? I'm never going to be a single dedicated channel expert. That's not my thing. But I am a pretty decent person at finding where the opportunities lie, which levers to really start pulling. And then I usually have the luxury of having just enough knowledge for a specific channel to be able to set it up, make sure that it's running relatively well, and then pass the torch to people that are way better at this than I am, right? So, I say this quite often. I am decent in what I do, and I can say that, but there's people out there that are so much better at so many things than I am. And I'm okay with that. I don't need to be the best. I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in knowing how to do a lot of things at a pretty good level. And then once I realize I've reached my peak, I can pass it on to somebody else, right?
Yeah, you even wrote a book, right, on that. So you're
Yes,
not that
right
bad.
here.
Awesome.
Right
So
here.
please tell us more about it in a few words. Why did you do it, and yeah, what is it
Well,
about?
really, it is about growth hacking. Specifically, it talks about 100 different types of like growth hacks that either I have done or people that I've worked with have done or people that I know quite closely have used before. It also covers a few of the like more traditional, the Dropbox things and the Airbnb stuff and the Robinhood cases and things like that. Um, but it really started out because as a growth strategist or consultant and consulting all kinds of different clients, I very often ran into the situation that I would just be realizing, oh, they're suffering from the same pain point, right, as this other client used to suffer from. And I would recommend it to them, like, I think this is the strategy that we need to adopt, or this is what we should focus on to like try to like alleviate your problems. Um, and some people would be very happy about it. Others would be like hesitant. And even some others would just outright refuse it, which everybody has their own rights, right? Um, but I sat down and I said, okay, well, what if I just like write all of these things down and know what works for me and know what has worked for my clients, know what has worked in the industry, write it down in a single book, and then I'll have like my own playbook. And I created like my own playbook in Notion initially, and I realized, well, it's a lot of work. There's a lot of text written. I might as well, why don't I just convert it into a book? And I wouldn't be myself and I didn't challenge myself to then say, okay, well, um, if I'm going to write a book, I might as well try my best to write it in the best way possible. So I dug through the Amazon algorithms, right? And just try to figure out, okay, how do people rank books on here? What do they do? I spend countless hours really just diving through it, downloading software, and just figuring out what categories to place my book in, then how many books are sold within a 24-hour time frame, which means how many do I have to sell within that time frame if I want to rank it higher. How big is my launch team going to have to be? So a lot of work, right? Like went into like actually prepping for it. I would say writing it was the easiest part. Like the rest was a lot harder, frankly. And of course, like there are tricks out there, right? And of course, I use those tricks. And you could say like, hey, like I don't necessarily talk about it that much, but figuring out how to use those tricks still requires you to have an understanding of where those tricks come from, who to turn to ask about it, and then to still like implement with it, right? So yes, you can game the system a little bit, but you still need the knowledge to know how to do it and then actually still execute on it. And I think that's where a lot of people fall flat, right?
Would you be okay with mentioning just one that comes to mind that you think could be useful for the current scenario for brands?
I think when it comes to specifically e-commerce brands, honestly, I think the issue that we are seeing, or at least that I've been seeing in the market before, it was like everybody tried to jump on like the subscription train on which for a lot of companies, e-commerce companies specifically, was kind of a disaster because they don't really understand what makes a subscription like a subscription e-commerce business work. Um, and if I have to give you a tip, go look at the SaaS industry and read books or read articles or talk to experts from that industry or even founders from like successful SaaS companies and ask them about the implementation of subscriptions. Because e-commerce like 10, 20 years behind where SaaS was. When I started working in 2016, I worked for a SaaS company first and I got exposed to that model, right? It's a lot of lessons you can learn from that. The other thing that I think a lot of e-commerce brands really need to focus on is platforms have evolved, right? From like Meta having changed, it was Facebook before, Google was very different. Like when I started, Google's very different now. And you need creative people, you need creative strategists to understand how to make good creative and how to utilize that. And you don't need super dedicated. I'm sorry for saying this, but you don't need the most dedicated channel experts, who have got millions in media buying, who are going to set up the weirdest campaign structures and everything else. If I see a client's account with like a gazillion campaigns on like Meta, I just go like, I don't even know what I'm doing here, right? Like this is like a mess. So focus on like the creative at the end of the day. And you said it yourself, right? I think you said your wife prefers to shop on Instagram. So your wife is a perfect example for somebody that you need to create ads for that are going to be Instagram native, right? Same thing goes for like TikTok. You want to have good TikTok ads, you need native TikTok ads, and you need people that have that TikTok experience who can translate it for you. If you put down a small team, ideally of a guy, worst case scenario, bring over a big marketing guy from like some bigger corporation, put him in an e-commerce role. This is this is not to talk badly about anyone, but my brother did that transition, and he struggles with like a smaller e-commerce brand because he comes from like a corporate background. And it's not because he's not a clever guy, but it's just because he's facing a different reality. Suddenly, you don't have $300,000 per month to spend on all kinds of things. You're working with a brand that doesn't have that brand knowledge, that brand awareness, right? And you're just having to translate what you know to like a much smaller brand. And that's very hard. So unless you find some people that know how to do that, you're probably not going to succeed very quickly.
I want to ask you something. How do you see
Sure.
the future of sustainable and socially responsible fashion evolving? And what role do you envision for BOAS in that future?
Like this is a it's an excellent question because we can see that this market is like really growing rapidly, right? And you can see that bigger brands are jumping on it as well. Even Levi's introduced like, their like secondhand product or like kind of like um refurbished Levi's jeans, maybe not the right way to put it, but they call it salvage, right? Salvage denim. Um, so I think a lot of companies are going to start jumping in on it, right? And they already are. And they're going to try and make that a much smoother experience. I think it's a good thing. I think it's also like a fundamental mindset change that people are seeing, right? We're seeing it not just in fashion, we're seeing it across the board. And what kind of role do I envision ourselves playing into it? I honestly think that super honest, I don't think our business model as it is right now is going to survive the next, let's say, 10 years. Why? Because of the fact that bigger brands like Levi's, Wranglers, all these fashion brands, they can do what we're doing but they can do it more efficiently. They can do it in a better manner than we can. The only way we can survive is if we find a way to innovate, right? And to distinguish ourselves. And if you don't have that vision, you don't have the understanding, you're not going to be there. For us, though, I think our model, what like really distinguishes it is not the fact that we sell secondhand jeans or that we sell vintage jeans. What distinguishes it is the way that we look at profits and the way that we're creating these ties with which are essentially our end customers, right? And the other thing that we're working on is working very closely with upcyclers and repurposing denim that is essentially that we cannot sell anymore, right? We get a lot of jeans that you would not believe the state they're in, or you can't really use them again. So we hand those off to upcyclers, and then they create more unique pieces. And we do really believe that that's where a large part of our future growth is going to come from. We're still going to have, without a doubt, a branch of like, vintage jeans that we're selling. And that's probably going to be driving our revenue for the next like 3-5 years. But I think upcycling is going to become a much bigger vertical when it comes to that. Because we will simply be able to be like competed out of the market by those bigger brands. That's just the reality, right? And I think maybe that's also the reason that's good that a person like myself is sitting here, because I'm a realist and I look at the future and I go like, well, what makes us unique? We're not that unique. Not from a product point of view. We're unique from a business point of view, or for how we structure our business. And that's what we need to capitalize on, right?
That's very, very interesting and goes in line with something we discussed the other day with a founder. They created sunscreen, a product. And you might say, why am I different? Or how can I be different? Just any other sunscreen in the market. Why? Well, they have a clear mission, as you guys. They have a clear mission. Well, the founder lost his ankle over skin cancer, and after that, he decided that he wanted to reduce that as much and prevent people from getting it. So he did a study. Long story short, the episode airs tomorrow
Oh, nice.
at the end of. I mean, it
Well,
will
nice
be
for the episode, but
March
not
the
for the
first.
person.
Yeah, it will be before this goes live, but it's March the 1st, so
Yeah.
it will be live by the time this goes live. So basically, you go look at that one because it's a very interesting story. Basically, what they did is saying, hey, why? How can we be different? Why are people not using sunscreen protection? Why? So he did a study, and it's an absolute delight to listen to that guy speak because it's not only the mission, it's what they did, how many product iterations and how they wanted to be recognized the best in market product. And you may say, sure, everyone wants to say that. No, they actually pulled it off and let their customers decide. And I don't want to spoil that, but they used a technique
No.
that it's amazing what they did. They actually cared about eradicating or reducing skin cancer from people, so they wanted to be making that experience more enjoyable for them and reduce the oily feel and all the stuff. So I can relate with what you're saying.
Yeah.
You're following a mission, and it's not about the current business model or the products. It's about a certain mission that you have, and that's the best you can do.
Yeah, I agree. Absolutely. Yeah.
Awesome. So, this was amazing so far. I wanted to thank you. But before you go, I wanted to ask you something I like asking every single guest that comes on the show. Do you have, or can you think about a mentor, former boss, or someone you follow that has influenced your actions and took you where you're at today?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I could name a lot of people, but I think right now, given the nature of the conversation that we're having, there's a Dutch person. His name is Rutger Bregman. I can send it to you later.
I
And
will
he's
have to
written a
write that down. I'm sorry.
yeah, yeah, no worries. And he wrote a book. It's available in English, and the English title is called Humankind, A Hopeful History. It was recommended to me by a good friend of mine. Um, but it's also full disclosure is Rutger Bregman has also talked about BOAS before. Um, but in his book, he really goes into in detail about humans and how we are and how we are shaped. And he has a much more positive outlook on humans as individuals. And that obviously speaks a lot to myself as a person. It speaks to us as a company. but I think it's also just really eye-opening for a lot of people around us, to really have a look that, are we as individuals, are we as humans bad or evil by nature? Doesn't have to be that way, right? It really doesn't have to be that way. And a lot of it we can also debunk, right? And I think that's something that I do feel. I think everybody personally needs to have that kind of outlook, right? Um, and I think as these younger generations are growing up, I'm not that old myself, but I can definitely see more and more people adapting that mindset, right? That, hey, we can do something collectively good together. We can take care of each other. But we need also to have like the right mindset for it, right? And I think that's just a very helpful thing to look into.
So, for everyone listening to this or watching this, make sure to go to the DTCinsider.com, find the episode if you are not already there, and you will find all the show notes, including what he just mentioned, the book, and of course, the link. If that person has a LinkedIn profile or website, of
Of
course,
course, yeah, definitely.
include it as well. So, Olaf, it was a pleasure to have you on. I learned a lot of things, so I want to thank you for being here.
Thank you, Brian, for having me. Thank you for listening, and I hope that all of your listeners will enjoy it. And yeah, stay positive, stay smiling. Good energies only. Like that's what you get.
Awesome. For everyone who wants more energy and keep smiling, where they can go to learn more about you and BOAS.
They can go to either they can visit our website to go to boas.co, or they can connect with me directly on LinkedIn. Um, and yeah, that's just myself. Honestly, if you need a pep talk or anything else, they can also just drop me a message. I'm a very open person. I'm always open for a conversation, especially if you feel like you need somebody to listen to, so or somebody that will listen to you. So
It's awesome. Thanks again, Olaf.
thanks, Brian, as well. Have a great one.